Good morning to you all. It's a pleasure for me to be chairing this first session of what promises to be a very interesting discussion. We have an eminent panel with us, and I would like to welcome all that are going to participate, in particular, our two keynote speakers. I would like to welcome Professor Isa Ali Ibrahim Pantami, Minister of Communications and Digital Economy of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I would like to also welcome Ambassador Tadej Rupel, the National Coordinator for External Aspects of Digitalization, Artificial Intelligence and Cybersecurity, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. We just saw in the video that Slovenia is very active in this field. I would like also to welcome the panelists, Professor John Shaw-Taylor, who is the Director of the International Research Center on Artificial Intelligence, IRCAI, of UNESCO, and is also the UNESCO Chair in Artificial Intelligence, Slovenia and the United Kingdom. Dr. Papagay, who is the Director General of the National School of Regional Cybersecurity in Senegal. Mr. Hassan Mahboub, the head of Sibanye Stillwater, digital mining laboratory called DigiMine from the Wits Mining Institute in South Africa. Also with us will be Mrs. Collier Majama, who is a Senior Program Officer of the Mozilla Foundation in Zimbabwe. And finally, Mrs. Katja Mastian, Digital for Development expert on the European Commission. So I would like all of my panelists and keynote speakers to be aware of the fact that we are going to have a limited time for our proceedings. I would like to inform the attendees, though, that all Zoom attendees that they will be muted during the presentations, but you will have the possibility of using the raise hand function during the Q&A session in order to ask your questions live. If selected, you will be granted the ability to unmute yourself and ask your question. Apologies in advance if you are not able to ask a question at this time. Zoom participants may also submit written questions, though, through the Q&A box throughout the meeting. But if you can, please use the raise hand function, as I have mentioned, during the allocated Q&A session so that you can ask your questions directly. Speaker biographies are available. You can find them in the website, but also in the Zoom chat box. This is for us to be able to use our time wisely and be able to concentrate on the pronouncements from the different speakers. Let me now turn to Ambassador Tadej Rupel, the National Coordinator for External Aspects of Digitalization, Artificial Intelligence and Cybersecurity on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. You have, sir, 7 minutes for your intervention. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Professor Lopez. Distinguished speakers, excellencies, panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a privilege for me to address you at the beginning of this first session at this year's edition of Africa Day Conference. The speakers before me already mentioned many important challenges when it comes to the citizen-centered technology governance. These are challenges that no country is immune to, but in Africa and Europe, they were all in the same place in terms of the challenges we are facing. As such, they must represent a very important feature in the comprehensive partnership between our two continents. As mentioned, no country is immune to the challenges posed by advance in the digital sphere. We are all trying to figure out the answers to similar difficult questions, answers how to shape the citizen-centered technology governance that is, of course, part of the wider citizen or human-centered approach to the digital transition and new technologies. We could all benefit from dialogue and from exchanging good practices, policies, and findings. I'm certain there is much to be learned and shared. The program of this conference and the profile of the speakers shows this clearly. I believe that in these efforts, regional frameworks such as African Union and the European Union can show their very concrete added value in convening, stimulating, and building on such exchanges, while the research institutions, civil society, and the private sector also have a big role to play. It is often said that the African-European partnership should be seen as multi-stakeholder partnership, and it is in the digital domain that we really see additional added value in this. Of course, apart from ideas and solutions, we also need the political will to implement those efforts in closer cooperation. It has already been mentioned today that prominence of digital transition as one of the key political priorities is growing. But placing citizens at its core is a more challenging task. But in my opinion, it is the only way which can go forward that will ensure sustainable and stable transition into the digital era. Here, the political leadership comes in, and the added value of the partnership between Africa and Europe will be tested. First, on the political level, we need a common recognition, a common understanding of the importance of the citizen-centered technology governance. This also includes the idea of cyber resilience technology. Social, political, and economic development requires a global, open, free, stable, and secure cyberspace, which is grounded in the rule of law and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Cybersecurity is indispensable to such development. Given the increase of cyber attacks conducted by state or state-sponsored actors, we must continue to promote responsible state behavior in cyberspace in the United Nations, as well as through regional cyber dialogue. There is a big potential for increased cooperation in this area. At the UN level, the EU and Africa constitute approximately 40% of all UN member states, which may be an opportunity to shape the UN-led agenda together. This corresponds with what was mentioned by our Minister of Foreign Affairs, namely that Slovenia intends to be a positive and harmonious driving force for partnership among nations in maintaining international peace and security for all, should we succeed with our candidature for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council. The mentioned cyber dialogue and cooperation can also help build a coalition of countries in support of a future UN Convention on cybercrime, which would add value in the global fight against cybercrime and would be compatible with existing tried and tested international instruments in the fields, as well as international human rights standards. And second, we need to integrate this vision of citizen-centered technology governance into our concrete joint work. One of them, cooperation in the field of cybersecurity and cybercrime between the United Nations, was already mentioned. Looking at some other initiatives, which were also partially mentioned today from my predecessor speakers, there is Digital for Development Hub for Africa, D4D, or the new EU Global Gateway Strategy. We can see that they recognize this priority, but we need to be mindful of the synergies between our actions and look at the concrete impact of our actions on the ground. We also need to keep up with the new trends better and adapt our approach to the challenging and changing landscape in human rights that digitalization and new technologies bring, so that we can better target our interventions. At this point, as some of my predecessors said, I would like also to touch upon a topic of artificial intelligence, and we saw some promotion video before at the beginning of this panel. And I believe that AI is one of the areas where we are counting for the trends and preparing for a new landscape, and this is of particular importance. The same elements and techniques that power the socio-economic benefits of AI can also bring about new risks or negative consequences for individuals or the societies. To address such potentials or potential misuses, UNESCO adopted back in 2021 a first ever comprehensive global standard setting instrument to provide AI with a strong ethical basis. The recommendation of the ethics of AI will not only protect, but also promote human rights and human dignity, and will be an ethical guiding compass and a global normative bedrock, allowing to build strong respect for the rule of law in the digital world. And I'm sure that Professor Sean Taylor will touch upon this point as well. The analysis shows that long-term consistent growth, to use the economic term, is best achieved in scenarios where interests of various stakeholders are balanced and the rights of citizens and businesses are protected through a combination of regulation on one hand and dynamic interaction of the stakeholders. One could conclude, therefore, that public acceptability and trust, nationally, regionally, and internationally, are key for the development and adoption of new emerging technology possibilities, from which tangible benefit for societies as a whole may occur. Citizen-centered digital governance is therefore necessary for any sustainable digital transition. And for this, a strong collaboration between our two continents is necessary. So thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ambassador, for making your points very clear. They echo actually the intervention earlier of Professor Isa Ali Ibrahim. I was eager to have him in this panel as well, but unfortunately, he has already delivered the key messages and will not be joining again. I would like now to turn to Professor Sean Taylor. That's already been mentioned by the Ambassador, the Director for International Research Center that is actually very much associated with the efforts of Slovenia. And he's going to tell us about human-centered artificial intelligence frameworks. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm very honored to be part of this panel and part of this extraordinary day. So human-centered artificial intelligence is something that I think is central if we're going to make artificial intelligence work for citizens. We need to equip citizens with an understanding of AI, at least to the level that they appreciate what it has the potential to do, and they are aware of their interactions with AI and can assess the dangers that AI might pose if misused or not appropriately managed. This also means ensuring that there are local AI experts in all regions and countries that can tailor solutions to local conditions and act as ambassadors and educators of the wider community. Ambassador Rupel has kindly mentioned the IRCAI Center that I am directing. It's building a network of excellence on AI and knowledge for sustainable development, which we're calling Nexus. And it aims to grow a worldwide community of centers collaborating to develop AI to address the world's most pressing challenges in a way that is relevant to local needs and conditions. There are already 7 centers from Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Tanzania, who have joined Nexus. And we have funded more than 25 projects in Africa through the Knowledge for All Foundation, a UK charity that I chair, and that is working with IRCAI the Data Pop Alliance, and the Ellis Alicante Foundation to establish the Nexus network. We would be delighted if you could encourage centers in your country to consider joining the network. If they reach out, we can meet to discuss collaborations. More collaborative projects with Africa are to be funded through the Humane AI Network of Excellence, a network that is promoting a European vision of AI that empowers rather than disempowers humans. The framework of the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI is closely aligned with this vision of artificial intelligence, enabling humanity to tackle our existing challenges in novel, creative ways, rather than create new challenges through the misuse of this technology. For citizens to be able to work creatively and constructively with AI, we must view AI as a sophisticated tool, but one currently lacking a decent user manual or an ability to interact collaboratively with humans. This is a call to arms to create the tools that will help entrepreneurs and civil society to take advantage of the benefits that AI can bring by ensuring that human-centered AI can interact with humans in a constructive and collaborative way, but also the tools that will educate the general public to understand what AI is already doing in their lives and has the potential to do, both for good, but also for bad. This will include an understanding of data science and the ethical challenges that AI solutions can pose. But this may sound too optimistic, but I think it's vital we do not underestimate the ability of citizens of all countries to take control of artificial intelligence. Humans are able to understand and work with other humans, intelligences that are infinitely more complex than AI systems. So why should they not understand and work with a more human-centered AI? It is only through this democratization of artificial intelligence that its full benefits can be realized, but also that its dangers can be prevented. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for actually also respecting the allocated time that I did not announce, but you are aware, 5 minutes for each of the panelists, and from bringing these points that I'm sure are going to be present in the discussion throughout the day. I would like now to give the floor to Dr. Papagay, who is the Director General of National School of Regional Cybersecurity in Senegal, who is going to tell us more about the shared challenges in governing emerging technologies that has already been somehow touched by Professor Shaw-Taylor. You have the floor. I don't...
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame. Je voudrais d'abord me féliciter de l'organisation de cette journée et profiter de l'occasion pour remercier la République de Slovénie, l'Union européenne, le Chatham House et les participants à cette journée extrêmement importante. Aujourd'hui, comme vous le savez, la transformation numérique est un défi de taille pour l'ensemble des États africains. Et face à cette situation, plusieurs gouvernements ont entrepris le virage numérique avec des initiatives touchant à la fois des prestations de services au service des citoyens, mais également le fonctionnement interne de l'appareil administratif, mais également la participation démocratique donc, des citoyens. Cela pose des défis, comme vous le savez, et des enjeux dans l'élaboration des politiques et de programmes, mais également dans certains pays comme le Sénégal, le numérique est considéré comme un levier de la transformation économique et sociale, et c'est la voie qui a été tracée par son Excellence, le chef de l'État, M. Macky Sall, pour le Sénégal. Et cette volonté s'est traduite, comme vous le savez, à travers la mise en œuvre d'une stratégie Sénégal numérique à laquelle est adossé également un plan Sénégal émergent qui vise à conduire le Sénégal sur la voie de l'émergence à l'horizon 2035. Dans cette situation, mais également dans la mise en œuvre de la politique du chef de l'État, donc dans le domaine de la cybersécurité et plus particulièrement dans le domaine de la formation. Donc, il a été mis en place cette école, l'École nationale de cybersécurité à vocation régionale, en partenariat avec la République française. Pour venir au sujet, donc, les missions de l'école s'articulent autour de la formation des acteurs africains, parce que l'école a une double dimension. Une dimension régionale, voire internationale, mais également une dimension interministérielle dans le cadre de la formation en cybersécurité, dans le domaine de la sécurité informatique, la lutte contre la cybercriminalité, la gouvernance de la cybersécurité et le renseignement numérique. Donc, c'est vous dire qu'il y a une prise de conscience des autorités donc, dans le cadre donc, de la transformation digitale qui intègre un volet important qui est le capital humain sur la base de formation pointue. C'est la raison pour laquelle il faut dire que plusieurs initiatives ont été mises en place au Sénégal dans le cadre de la collaboration sur la gouvernance des technologies centrées sur les citoyens. Pour rappel, c'est un ensemble de processus, outils et technologies utilisés donc pour améliorer les relations entre les citoyens d'une part, mais également les relations entre les citoyens et le gouvernement. Donc, ce sont des technologies qui sont orientées. On peut parler de Civitech, on peut également parler d'Open Data ou d'Open Gouv. Mais le principe, c'est de mettre des outils au service de la démocratie afin de faciliter la participation et l'engagement citoyen. Initier des plateformes de consultation et de remontée d'initiatives et de participer en ligne. À préciser que cela se traduit par une ambition portée par les gouvernements et les administrations publiques pour mener une action publique ouverte, plus transparente, plus collaborative. L'ouverture et le partage des données, donc publiques. Les objectifs. Je vais en parler d'abord. Donc, c'est de renforcer la modernisation des actions des administrations publiques par la mise en place de mécanismes efficaces de dialogue et d'intensification des échanges. L'intégration du numérique dans les démarches de concertation et de participation citoyenne, mais également le fait de rendre l'action publique plus visible et plus transparente grâce à des consultations en ligne et améliorer la fourniture des services gouvernementaux avec des outils qui peuvent être développés par des entreprises ou des organisations à but non lucratif, voire par un gouvernement. Et tout cela contribue à une démocratie participative d'une manière collaborative et inclusive par la mise en œuvre de solutions numériques pour que chacun puisse prendre part à la vie publique, notamment à l'élaboration et au suivi des plans de développement. Alors, des initiatives de Civitech ont été élaborées au Sénégal. Je peux en citer quelques-uns sous nous 2012, et qui est une plateforme de suivi des campagnes électorales et des opérations de vote. Il y a également Diocolab, qui est des espaces de coworking dans la sous-région et qui a été mise en place en 2019, Samabat et autres plateformes de hashtag, de forums et de groupes de discussion. Il faut dire également que dans le cadre du Covid-19, il y a des initiatives telles que pour lutter contre la propagation du coronavirus qui ont été mises en place, mais également pour lutter contre la désinformation en ligne, mais pour se prévenir et se protéger. Aujourd'hui, face au développement de ces activités ou bien de ces initiatives citoyennes en ligne, il faut, à mon avis, compte tenu donc des menaces liées donc au cyber, il faut le respect d'un certain nombre de critères, non seulement pour permettre aux citoyens d'échanger, de partager, mais également de se prémunir et se préserver donc contre certaines activités délictuelles en ligne, comme la cybercriminalité, avec toutes ses formes. Et ces critères, j'en citerai 3. Il faut la transparence, il faut également l'égalité, mais il faut l'organisation et le contrôle. C'est pour terminer par vous dire qu'il y a des défis, effectivement, et des enjeux qui nécessitent aujourd'hui un encadrement. Mais au-delà de l'encadrement, cela nécessite aussi, compte tenu des menaces multiples qui sont notées à travers donc, le cyberespace, l'espace des technologies de l'information et de la communication, il y a forcément également un partenariat qui doit être mis en œuvre ou bien renforcé entre les États africains, mais également les autres États, notamment donc les autres pays, l'Union européenne, mais également les organisations africaines. Donc, pour mettre en place un dispositif de régulation et d'encadrement, mais également renforcer les mécanismes de prévention et de sanction en implémentant des outils techniques d'identification des auteurs d'infractions à la loi pénale. Mais la simple répression ne suffit pas. Il faut, à mon avis, aussi renforcer la sensibilisation à tout le niveau par la formation des acteurs sur les dangers, notamment la divulgation de fausses nouvelles, la décontextualisation, l'infox, mais également les fake news et toutes ces questions donc liées à la criminalité qui affectent la vie privée, mais qui peuvent également menacer donc l'intégrité donc des gouvernements. Donc voilà, en résumé, mon temps est expiré. Donc les quelques idées que je souhaiterais donc partager avec vous, tout en vous remerciant encore de cette invitation au nom du chef de l'État, mais également au nom de la coopération. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup pour votre intervention et pour nous avoir fait connaître toutes ces différentes initiatives régionales et aussi au niveau du Sénégal qui sont très importantes et qui montrent un activisme dans ce domaine qui est vraiment salutaire. I would like now to turn to our third panelist, Mr. Hassan Mahboub. Is the head of Sibanye Stillwater digital mining lab called DigiMine. And he's also someone that has been quite active in the field, and he's going to tell us about leveraging emerging technologies for socioeconomic transformation, based certainly in his experience dealing with the implementation of technological solutions in the industry, but also his vast knowledge of how to deal with the issues of governance. So you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is really an honor to be the part of this panel on such an important and happy day today. Digital technologies, the emerging technologies, I think these technologies are already playing a very critical role in the socioeconomic transformation. These technologies which are already exist there, and the new technologies, for example, big data and data lake, warehouses, autonomous robots, particularly in mining industry and in the communities, in industrial Internet of Things, simulations, mixed reality, system integration, blockchain for transparency and cybersecurity, and of course, most importantly, artificial intelligence, and many other more. All these technologies, I think they are playing a very important role because of the present pandemic. Many industries, specifically mining, which was previously considered as a resistant to technology change, have already accelerated their digital adaptation efforts. And as a matter of fact, this pandemic has actually pushed the fast forward button for many industries to adapt these digital technologies. And industries, they are not only adopting these digital technologies because of the requirement of the business, but also all the stakeholders. When I talk about the stakeholders, I'm talking about the communities, the shareholders, the workers, everyone who is directly or indirectly linked to the business are basically in a need to adopt these technologies. And of course, the technology that we are developing at DigiMine is human-centered technology, and this is, I think, very important. And one of the key thing I think that is which we are practically implementing in mining industry in South Africa. One of the common link between all the existing and emerging technologies is the data. And I think this is basically the glue for socioeconomic transformation. And data is already considered as the oil for 21st century. And data science, which is the data analytics, can be considered as the combustion engine to convert this raw data into a meaningful information for informed decision making. However, in my opinion, there are a number of important concerns and challenges that exist on ground that might be regarded a barrier to fully utilizing the digital technologies for socioeconomic transformation. And I am talking particularly with respect to my experience in mining industry and the nearby communities that we dealt with. The first big challenge is about the digital divide. I think it is an important thing, the gap between the demographics and the regions that have access to the modern information and communication technologies like ICTs, and those that don't have or restricted access to these technologies. So this gap is this divide or gap is growing bigger and bigger. So there should be some intervention to minimize this gap. The second is digital well-being. I think those who already have access to these digital technologies, the concern for them is the impact of these digital technologies, like for example, the impact on their mental, physical, social, and emotional health. But at the same time, most of the time, we don't know that how to interact with this technology at first. So this digital well-being is one of the other challenges that we can see in the industry widely. Then digital literacy, which I think is a skill set gap. So there is a skill set gap between those who know how to use the technology and those who don't know how to use this particular technology. So this digital literacy gap is also a concern. And I think the digital platforms, like for example, the online education system now that we have introduced among all the educational universities and in the schools is a contribution towards minimizing that gap. And the other big challenge is digital trust. I think that is to ensure the transparency and accessibility of the right information at the right time, not only to the communities, but among all the stakeholders. And then the other gap that I would like to highlight is ethical AI. I think my successor has already talked about that ethical AI, but being as a data scientist, whenever I develop an algorithm, I always ask a question to myself that, what if something went wrong? Who will be responsible for that? Is it me who has developed that algorithm, or is it that machine who adopted that algorithm and took the decision based on my artificially intelligent developed algorithm? So I think it is important that man and machine needs to learn a common language, because in future man and machine needs to work together. So this common language is very important to learn in our future for a better decision making, for a better world. And then the last gap, I would say, in my opinion, is the gap between the emerging technologies and the law. So there is a need to close the gap between technology and the policy. So most of the time, we can see that the technology is growing rapidly, exponentially, but the law and the policy is not growing accordingly. So there is a dire need that we need to focus on the development of policies. And I'm very pleased to know that there is at UNESCO level, there are talks about the ethical AI, which is very good. And but similar to that, we also need to talk about the ethical implementation of other technologies as well. So this is from my experience. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for putting a sharp focus on the gaps and the needs for some important educational tools that are going to fill some of those gaps, but also the policy requirements that are associated with them. I'm now going to turn to Mrs. Collier Majama. She's the Senior Program Officer of the Mozilla Foundation in Zimbabwe. And she's going to tell us more about digital ethics, which has already been referred by the previous speakers, but she's going to also tell us about the issue of digital ethics and rights in more detail. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Professor Lopez, and also to my the previous speaker also for making it easier to introduce the conversation I'm going to have in the next 5 minutes. I think broadly speaking, when you mention the word ethics, it immediately invokes thoughts around, you know, the normative claims around an ideal world. So what is right, what is just, and what is fair. But ethics are founded on values and not on rights. And ethical values tend to, you know, change or differ across different jurisdictions. So it is key to note, in the words of Dr. Anna Jobin, who's at the Institute for Internet Society in Hamburg, that ethical intelligence is not merely a technical issue, but ethics must also be a part of the governance of AI. And I think we've just heard that being spoken about in detail previously. But the challenge is that the centrality of personal data in the functionality of most of the products that we're seeing being unrolled in the industry has heightened a lot of attention around, you know, the concept of ethical AI and also automated decision-making tools that have without a doubt become very powerful and influential as they affect our daily lives. So a constant challenge for the tech industry today, albeit there've been a number of efforts to dedicate resources and develop responsible and ethical tech, is that translation of ethical principles into practical necessities of business. And you'll find that companies continue to be heavily criticized for prioritizing their bottom line over ensuring ethical practices. So there's a need to translate, you know, what we see as the external norms and pressures into practice. And if you sit down and really think about it, when we start talking about, you know, AI ethics, we really need to go back to the global and regional human rights frameworks and treaties, as they seem to still offer a practical guideline for finding ways to align, you know, their revenue generation and the ethical or robust value of the utility of the internet or their products for the users. I think also of great concern, or rather, let me just say what has actually come out clearly is that there seem to be a growing consensus around 8 thematic areas or trends around ethical AI. And I think the biggest for those of you who've been following is accountability, transparency, and fairness. But you've also got issues around safety, security, non-discrimination, you know, when we spoke about the human-centered aspect, non-discrimination, then there's the human control of technology, what we at Mozilla also like to look at as the, you know, the capacity of individual to have control of their own use. So I have 5 key issues that I would like to highlight for consideration in terms of ethical AI. And the first, obviously, being also having been mentioned, is the strong data protection regulation that considers privacy and ethics by design. And I think that what is also key, and a conversation that we should still be having, is that the private sector in Africa should actually at national level, or even agreeing at continental level, to have a code of ethics and set data protection standards in line with their own national policies in order to protect, you know, important rights such as the right to privacy. Then the second one is an adherence to the existing ethical and regulatory frameworks, along with sustainable mechanisms to unlock the availability and value of data that people use in order to limit the harms. And here quickly, I would refer obviously to the Malabo Convention, and most critically for us now is the African Commission's Declaration on Principles on Freedom of Expression and ATI, which now also has an element on the internet. But also there are arguments around finding the right balance between the right to privacy, technological innovation, and governance at country level. And I think for us in Africa now, strong considerations to make around cross-border data flows, especially with the Continental Free Trade Agreement. But it also comes back immediately to our national ICT policies. And then to zone in on that now, the last 2 points are really looking at the importance of, the development of risk assessments to address ethical challenges that are linked to AI in all stages. So that would be from inception, the design, the development, and ultimately as they are being used or implemented. And then lastly, which is shouldn't actually be the last one, but is also incorporating ethical practices, rights and responsibilities in education and even in higher tertiary institutions curriculum, and the need to start reimagining what a school curriculum or sending out into the world a responsible technologist who can also hold the people that employ him or her to account for the technologies that they produce. Thank you, Professor Lopez.
Atenda. I'm very happy that you were very clear with the 5 points, the 5 issues that will help us in the Q&A session to focus a bit the discussion on the issues of ethics that have been raised by many so far. Our last but not least entertainment of today is actually to have the opportunity of listening to Katja Machen. She is the digital policy expert of the European Commission, or works with the European Commission, and has the privilege of now, wrapping up this panel, which is always a bit difficult, but also entertaining. And I would like to give the floor to tell us about Digital for Development Hub, which is an initiative on technological innovation and international partnerships. You have the floor.
Many thanks, Professor. Distinguished speakers, chers collègues, dear colleagues in Slovenia, Europe, Africa, across the world. It's really a great honor to be here today, speaking alongside such honorable guests and also seeing so many familiar faces. So as you know, it has been a long journey, long before actually I joined the European Commission a couple of years ago, to put the conversation on digital on the table, on the agenda in the cooperation between the EU and Africa. But now I'm proud to say that we have really taken on huge commitments when it comes to digital transformation in Africa, as also announced, mentioned by our Commissioner, Jutta Urpilainen, in her opening speech. And as you know, we live in a very geopolitical world, and we are also very well aware of how politicized digitalization is. However, we at the European Commission, at the European Union, together with the African Union, as already so mentioned by some of the previous speakers, we share this vision of bringing values and the human being at the center of this development, both in terms of digital development and also more generally when it comes to development of economy and society. And so there's also this common understanding that digital economy can also only be developed if we bridge the digital divide, which also includes the gender divide, by promoting inclusive innovation and ensuring trusted connectivity and fair digital markets. So these are issues that are really important to us, as well as we see in our conversation with the African partners. So now one key tool to implement this external dimension of our digital agenda and address the digital divide is the D4D Hub, the Digital for Development Hub, as already mentioned also by Ambassador Rupel in his in his keynote speech. The D4D Hub serves as a strategic multi-stakeholder platform that fosters digital cooperation between so-called Team Europe and its global partners, both from the public and private sectors. It is really a great tool that brings together different stakeholders to build better coherence, create synergies, exchange experiences. So it's really a great initiative that can be of great interest also to fellow panel speakers today and other participants in the event. So please, this is an invitation to you to also get in touch. So I will spare you the details of how this D4D Hub is structured in terms of with its board of directors, secretariat, member states, and other actors involved, which is quite complex. But just to say that since the launch In December of 2020, 12 EU member states have joined the hub, and we have facilitated weekly D4D hub working group meetings to bundle strategic interests of these 12 member states, but also implementing agencies, development banks, European development banks in a true Team Europe spirit. And so far, 2 regional branches have been launched of the D4D hub, with the Africa branch in December in 2020, which is in a way the most mature one, and then one for Latin America and Caribbean in December 21, under the Slovenian Council presidency. And under the Africa branch, we are actually discussing within a series of thematic working groups on different topics, where we identify areas of common efforts on digital connectivity, on governance and innovation, entrepreneurship, cybersecurity, skills, gender, rights, so many different areas that are grouped under, for the moment, 8 thematic working groups, so many topics also that have been mentioned by previous speakers. And so, yeah, this is really maybe what I could mention as part of this D4D hub, one tangible result or an event that was also mentioned by Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrzej Logar, in his opening speech, as well as by Ambassador Rupel, is the Africa-Europe D4D Hub multi-stakeholder forum that took place on the 18th of March and was co-hosted by the AU and the EU. It was really also a great collaboration with colleagues from the African Union that brought together, in a virtual event, over 1,500 participants from 580 different organizations. We had 13 different sessions on topics such as connectivity, data governance, entrepreneurship. So it was really a great platform to discuss concrete joint actions in these different areas, but also raise challenges, identify opportunities to strengthen cooperation between Africa and Europe. And it demonstrated this common wish to work together really between the AU and EU to promote an inclusive digital transformation. So we really have to, in my opinion, build on a momentum now to really strengthen this cooperation. And so whether it is about sustainable growth, about digital ID systems, or the global gateway, as also presented by the Commissioner Urpilainen in her opening speech, the panelists in this event, the D4D Hub multi-stakeholder forum, agreed that the participatory processes are important co-creative approaches. This is really what we are trying to do with this D4D Hub to help citizens to trust digital infrastructures. And so yes, this participatory approach is a prerequisite for leaving no one behind, in our opinion. So yes, I will stop here and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing us this dimension of the partnerships that are already ongoing and the strong collaboration, particularly between the European Union and the African Union, which is very welcome because, as it has been mentioned by different speakers, this is something that is common to all countries, but the organizations that have a regional responsibility can steer the process along and help in the regulatory frameworks and defining policy. And we have now a time for the panel to respond to questions and for a Q&A that I would like to invite all participants to be active and participate on. I myself was very impressed by the fact that we had quite an interesting similarity of concerns and also proposals coming from the different speakers, all of them very much pointing in the direction of the need for regulation and policy to be more clear, and for the governance aspects to be given priority by the different actors. All of them very much concerned and interested in how we can introduce ethical standards, all the way to respecting very important principles that exist already in Africa and Europe for dealing with rights, and a code of conduct has been proposed that could be a way of dealing with some of these ethical issues. Everybody very much interested in the inclusiveness dimension and how citizens should be part and parcel of how we are going to deal with technology, and artificial intelligence was mentioned in particular. Also, all very much concerned about how we can have a system that is predictable, that will allow for technology and different solutions to be contributive to production and economic transformation. It has been mentioned in particular with Africa having a deficit and a gap. We'll need for that also a lot of investment on education, and a number of initiatives have been mentioned, some regional, even in the case of Senegal, covering neighboring countries, some by regional organizations, as it has been now referred in detail by Katja. But I think in general, what we saw was some high degree of complementarity amongst the different speakers, which is very much welcome. I would like now to give the floor to Ambrose Iena. I would like our colleagues dealing with the Zoom technology to give her the floor, so she can ask her question or her comment directly. Ambrose?
Hello? Hello, Prof.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I've just posed a question on the chat side that the world is a global village now, and talking about Africa-Europe cooperation in technology deployment and development for our countries or for our planet. Africa cannot afford to be left behind. Because it will diminish the benefits of technology on the global plane. What is Europe, which is relatively, advanced, planning to do with Africa, so we can catch up with emerging technologies like metaverse, 5G technologies, crypto, or digital currencies for that matter?
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Professor Shaw-Taylor maybe to give us a first reaction to this question. Professor, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you, Ambrose, for the question. I think, certainly AI and digital technologies generally are an opportunity actually to, if you like, a jump forward for countries where perhaps other technologies have been harder to catch up with as they've developed. The reason is that they're generally openly accessible, obviously modulo infrastructure developments that have been talked about and are vital to ensure that people will be able to access through the internet various tools and resources. But modulo that, I think there is a huge opportunity. And we've been, as I mentioned in my my short introduction, I mentioned that we've been funding through this charity that I run in the UK, a number of what we're calling micro projects in different African countries, which are really around applying AI to various challenges, local challenges, be it low resource languages, local health problems, agriculture, etc. And what we've been really excited and enthused by is firstly the ability and the enthusiasm of the people who have applied to this funding mechanism, and the quality of the research and the outputs that have been produced, with one of them actually winning a global Wikimedia award. It was not for developing countries. This was a global award, and this research coming out of this project was selected by the Wikimedia Foundation for that award. So I think this tells us that the enthusiasm, the ability, and in principle the tools. And here I might say just a small word of we tend to talk down the the big companies are trying to exploit and so on. But I do think that we should, be aware that many of these companies, like, for example, Google, and are making much of the research and the tools they're developing freely available for anybody to use, such as TensorFlow, the PyTorch. A lot of this is open source. Some of it's developed outside companies, but some within companies. And these tools are available for people to start using in developing countries. And also, it is possible to get access to the cloud resources for computation. Potentially, we've been given quite a lot of access from Amazon, which we're hoping to also make available through our support to developing country groups that are interested in developing new solutions and applications. So I do think it is an opportunity. As I say, the thing I wanted to emphasize in what I was saying is we shouldn't just concentrate on a few small groups developing the skills. They're very, very important because they can then be the champions within a country to, educate other people and the population generally about the value and demystify. So I think that's the other danger, that AI or these sort of technologies become something kind of too inaccessible. I think we need to make them understandable, accessible to ordinary citizens, because it's actually ordinary citizens and entrepreneurs who are going to come up with the ideas for new applications. It's not the technology, the nerds like who are developing the technology. They are thinking more on the technical level. It's the people who are actually thinking in business terms who will actually be able to translate those ideas once they can understand and work with the technology developers to actually create new solutions and products that are relevant and tuned to different regions and different countries, and are actually delivering value for citizens in those countries. And that's what we need to actually achieve.
Thank you, Professor. I have another question from Xavier Estico. He's from the National Institute of Science and Technology Intervention of the Seychelles. So you have the floor now. Xavier? Trying to get Xavier. Okay.
Yes. Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask this question. From what I've listened so far, I in summary, I've heard a lot on the soft components of in the transformation, like policy, regulations, ethical issues regarding AI. But maybe I would want to see also there's a challenge in this process, which is related to the physical infrastructures for supporting the transformation, as well as also the elements of affordability of data. In the case of Seychelles, it is a top priority, digital entrepreneurship, digital economy, but we also facing the challenge. It's quite capital intensive investment into infrastructure, like to get the ability to put the infrastructure to be able to build this digital transformation, and also the affordability of the services data. And in a way, we also concerned when you call about inclusivity, because cost of data can also lead a bit to what you call technology divide. Those who can afford, those who cannot afford. These issues also needs to be taken into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xavier. I'm going to ask Hassan Mahbub to share his views on this topic, because he has himself identified a certain number of requirements for infrastructure to be put in place, for data to be used in a more meaningful and in a more prosper way. So Hassan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is very relevant. As I said, that that there is a digital divide, and to overcome this divide, it's not only the one industry or one relevant stakeholder. It should come from across all the board. To just share one thing with you, there was a project that we would like, we wanted to roll over the community engagement with the mining companies. So mining companies provided some of the funding where we developed applications so that the communities can directly link to the higher level executives to put their problems in front of them. The funding was used, technology was developed. The moment we tried to roll over that technology, we realized that 50% of the community, they don't have a smartphones with them. And those who have the smartphone, they don't have the data facility with them. And those who have the data facility, they don't know how to use that for the applications. So I think this has been realized not only by the industry, but also at the government level as well. Because we can see that most of the companies, for just to name few, for example, MTN, Vodacom and others, they have realized that this need as well, and to contribute towards the community and to enhance their ESG ratings as well. Most of these companies, they are stepping forward to make this data available one way or the other to the communities, to the other stakeholders. But at the same time, just to give another example, the decision makers like government, they also have some sort of initiatives to roll over these technologies, but prior rolling over these technologies, to make sure that there is a necessary infrastructure, not only physical but also digital, that needs to be placed there first prior rolling over this technology. And universities, from my experience, the universities are also playing a critical role in that by introducing cost-effective technologies and cost-effective solutions for these challenges. So I think this need has been realized at all levels, and in partnership with other countries, particularly with Europe, I think there will be a time when we will overcome these challenges, and soon in near future, for a better world, the divide, I'm not saying that we will close this divide forever, but we can minimize this divide in partnership with this kind of European projects that we have.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Dr. Papagay also to come on this issue. I think he has some views on it, and later I will also give the floor to Koliwe, that also wants to tell us a bit more about access issues. Dr. Papagay, you have the floor. Yes, we can hear you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Allez-y, allez-y.
Je voudrais, par rapport à la question, effectivement, saluer non seulement sa pertinence, mais également partager avec vous quelques idées relatives au nombre de personnes qui sont aujourd'hui connectées en Afrique, mais également l'utilisation des technologies qui a considérablement évolué au niveau du continent africain. Donc, avec l'arrivée du G5, donc il y a de nouveaux défis aujourd'hui qui se posent donc sur le plateau technique africain, mais également dans le cadre stratégique. Effectivement, des efforts quand même ont été notés pour le développement des technologies, qui a permis quand même à certains États africains donc, de mettre en place des communautés de données, mais également donc dans le cadre de la lutte contre la cybercriminalité, à investir dans le cadre des renforcements des capacités du cadre juridique, mais également du cadre opérationnel. Donc au Sénégal, récemment, le pays s'est doté d'un data center pour faciliter la digitalisation de son administration, mais également pour faciliter donc, la garantie donc, de la souveraineté numérique. Cela veut dire qu'avec ces évolutions perpétuelles des technologies de l'information et de la communication, et du taux de pénétration donc des Africains sur Internet, mais également des innovations notées. Donc, les États donc, doivent faire des efforts considérables dans le cadre de la définition de stratégie, mais également dans le cadre de la sensibilisation donc, des acteurs africains en d'hygiène informatique. Parce que le développement des technologies conduit donc à diverses formes de criminalité qui sont notées. Et surtout dans le cadre de la protection des données à caractère personnel, qui commande aujourd'hui donc la mise en place de politiques, mais également un partenariat stratégique entre les États africains et les autres États dans le cadre de la coopération. Merci.
Merci. I'm now going to to give the floor to Koliwe Majama to tell us about access.
Thank you, Professor Lopez. I just wanted to add on to the issues around access by just actually highlighting what seem to be the, just cross-cutting challenges that are faced across the region. And I think that it's good that as we're speaking today, that we also be open about the challenges that we feel should actually be addressed. And I think that in terms of access and cost, one of the challenges that we see is that there hasn't been much liberalization of the telecom sectors in quite a number of the African countries. And what we're seeing is monopolies by companies who established, who were probably the first or initial players. And even in terms of just like broadening what their mandate or what their provision of services is. And what you find is that there are very few small telecoms or mobile network operators in African countries. So even in terms of coming up with a policy in country around cost, it becomes also a challenge, especially if you have regulatory authorities that are not independent. And that seems to be an overarching trend. The second one is also, I think that African governments also need to really seriously take the issue around the development of community networks very seriously. There's been a large campaign that's been led by the Association for Progressive Communications for community networks in the different countries as an alternative for communities to be able to access the internet. But what we see is that there are not many countries have actually taken up that initiative, and it's probably time that we were frank and honest about the fact that we cannot have those monopolies and still not recognize that there are certain areas which have geographical challenges that those companies don't see as viable as alternatives to have networks for especially the rural communities. And then the last one for me was the issue around public Wi-Fi and telecenters. I think that there's also been a restriction or limitations around the development of those telecenters, because I think at the beginning, maybe early 2015, there were quite a number of countries had policies that were promoting those telecenters or public Wi-Fi, but there still hasn't been a development or just broadening of the use of those centers, or even just an assessment around how viable or accessible they are to the communities that they're supposed to be serving. Then my last point was really a comment, I think, in response to what Papa Guye, Dr. Guye just mentioned around 5G. I think that it's also important to note that there are several challenges that are being faced in the countries that have actually enrolled 5G, which are your Ethiopia, I think Egypt, Nigeria, Senegal, and even in the country that I'm based in, Zimbabwe, is that there's really not much clarity around spectrum regulation. And there needs to be serious moves around just the development of regulation around the spectrum in the respective countries. Also, the reality that the person who posed the question mentioned around the commercial viability about this unrolling of the 5G, because honestly, there will really be low number of citizens who would actually be able to purchase the smartphones themselves, and we still do have the challenge of expensive internet costs in the countries. Thank you, Professor Lopez.
Thank you. Your intervention prompts me to ask Katya a question, which is about how some of the initiatives that have been mentioned that she shared with us also cover the digital divide and access dimensions that have now been brought to light by the two interventions we just had. Katya, please.
Well, I very much agree also, I mean, by the question raised by the member of the audience, and we're very much aware also of the concerns. So on one hand, it's not about only the soft side, but also the hard, the infrastructure side, and access and cost are certainly an issue. So here, what we do on the EU, let's say this is something that is happening in parallel, that was also announced at the summit in February, is the Global Gateway, which includes a whole package of Team Europe initiatives and flagship initiatives that create an investment package to be delivered. And I mean, it's a huge say project as such, leading to 150 million euro in investment by 2027. We would we work both with the public sector and private sector really to leverage funding. And so this is also next to what we do in the D4D hub, let's say on the more soft side. We of course need also this huge investments in infrastructure that we're very much aware of. And the ambition is to, by 2030, accelerate universal access to the internet for all in Africa, to have secure, safe access. So we are definitely working on it and strengthening our efforts.
Oh, thank you very much. I want now to use the remaining of our time to ask each one of the panelists to tell us a bit more about each one of the paradoxes that I'm going to put across to them. And I would like to start with Professor Sean Taylor. And the paradox I wanted him to reflect on and share with us his views is the fact that he mentioned that we need to have a more ambitious goal of involving citizens in all the decision processes. And what we are seeing emerging is more and more self-regulation by monopolies of parts of the technological development. So how do we address this paradox, Professor?
It's a toughie. Yes. Well, I think, my theme that I think, is going to be critical is this idea of human-centered AI. I think the problem we have is that AI is poorly understood by non-experts, and therefore it's poorly appreciated what can be done with it and what is being done with it. And this is partly because it isn't typically human-centered. And when I say human-centered, I mean by that an AI that can interact with a human in the way another human being can, in the sense that, if you are talking to somebody who's giving you advice, an AI system might be giving you advice. Let's imagine that AI system is not an AI system, but it's a person. If they suggest something, we as human beings feel completely comfortable saying, why are you suggesting that? Can you explain, why is it that you're suggesting that? And this is something that an AI system is incapable of doing. An AI system will say, this is what I think, and that's it. It won't say how confident it is, typically. It won't say why it thinks that. It won't have any depth of understanding of interaction. And I think we need to move to systems that have that. And these will enable a much more engaged interaction and understanding from non-experts. And those could be, as I said, entrepreneurs, could be civil servants, and could be ordinary citizens. And those then will see AI as it is, but also see it as something that they can work with and be empowered by. And that's where we need to get to, where people feel empowered and understanding of what the AI can do. Otherwise, the consequence is they're going to feel disempowered because they'll feel something's happening and I don't understand what it is. And it's maybe doing something for good, maybe it isn't, I don't know. And I think that's the situation we are mostly in at the moment. So I think these are the pressing challenges that we face. And I think the education of the general public is a critical thing. And there has been some efforts in that direction. The system developed within Finland that was a kind of introductory course on AI is good, but I don't think it goes far enough or in a way that is accessible enough to ordinary citizens. And that's where I think we can really work together in order to develop these kind of tools and ideas and help to educate more broadly the public around what AI can do and the benefits it can bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I'm now going to turn to Dr. Gay. You are a specialist of cybersecurity, and everybody will agree cybersecurity is needed to put a bit of order into the space, particularly when it comes to issues of security of citizens and countries for the matter, when it comes to dealing with fake news, when it comes to dealing with illicit financial flows and the like, and the list goes on. But some will say cybersecurity is also being used to curtail human rights and the freedom of expression. So how do you handle that paradox, Dr. Gay? Dr. Gay, please. You have the floor. Trying to connect with Dr. Gay. Well, if we cannot immediately access Dr. Gay, I will save that question and would like to turn to Koliwe. Koliwe, you had a very articulate description of some of the challenges that we have in the regulatory dimensions of this discussion. And everybody will again agree that regulation is needed to make sure that we have the guarantees and the predictability that should be associated with technological use. But you have also been a bit circumspect about how the regulators can be captured, and sometimes that will create not a level playing field, but rather a situation where we will have more problems than we would have solved without regulation. So how do you handle from a political point of view the pressures that always exist for the regulators to actually abide by the interests of some private citizens or private companies?
Thanks, Professor Lopez. I see you're trying to put me on the spot, but I think I'll take up that challenge. I think in terms of just like the partisan nature of regulatory authorities, that's obviously a broader governance conversation. But in respect of regulation or governance around internet governance related work, I think what seems to be the solution is an adaptation of the multi-stakeholder convenings. So the internet governance forums that people have at national level, but we also have at a continental level with the Secretariat at the African Union. Now, I think that the simulation of that model of multi-stakeholder governance, and I think it also goes back to some of the issues that, you know, Professor John Shaw was talking about, are that we need to also be clear about our civil society participation, because when you get into a state, you will find that you have what is called mainstream civil society, which is your bigger civil society organizations that do have the capacity to get general funding for their administration and also work in the communities. But there seems to be a downplaying around the community or grassroots movements, community-based organizations and grassroots movements. So I think finding a balance in terms of involving or bringing in the community-based organizations into those internet governance platforms, where you'll be talking about obviously the trends that are developing, and in this instance, issues around artificial intelligence, so that they can be broken down by not only geographical communities of interest, but also, just communities of interest, people who have something common to be able to speak, which is usually your marginal groups. So you're talking about the LGBTI groups, you're looking at also women, rural women who may actually be working, on the farms, for instance. So for my quick response is having a very open and balanced internet governance forum in each of the nations or the states, who can then represent opinions or issues at a regional level, which would be at your African Internet Governance Forum. Thank you, Professor Lopez.
Thank you. And Hassan, in 1 minute, I just wanted you to tell us how the technological developments, particularly in the mining sector, because you are more familiar with it, are affecting employment, and the labor intensiveness of mining is gone. So now it's more technologically driven, and that has created some social tensions. In 1 minute, tell us how this can be addressed.
Thank you, Chair. I think, Chair, you're absolutely right. The mining industry is now adapting more and more technological advancements. And particularly, it's not about that industry wants to do that, but it is the need of the industry, because just look at the South Africa. We are mining at 3.5 kilometer down underground. So 3.5 kilometer down, as we are going more down, the environment is getting more dark, dangerous, and dirty. And we don't want to put the humans in that environment where the risk is very high. So at some stage, technology is going to play its role at that level. But at the same time, mining industries has put a lot of efforts to reskill their current employees so that they can be reskilled and upskilled at other different levels. In parallel to that, one of the initiatives that has been taken by the industry is to reskill the community that is living there by providing them other opportunities. So I think these are some of the key parameters that mining industry is taking to reskilling and upskilling the current employees to make sure that they are still relevant to the industry.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for more. I wanted to give the floor to Katya and go back to Dr. Papagay, but we have to respect the time that has been allocated for the session, since it's being turned live, and it is very difficult to organize the timing otherwise. But I wanted to thank the panelists for a vibrant discussion, and also tell you that we are now going to have a video break, and we are going to have a video on International Research Center on Artificial Intelligence. And once again, thank you all for an excellent panel. Our keynote and our panelists have been great and gave us a lot of food for thought. And I'm sure during the day, we are going to continue the discussion.
IRCAI, the International Research Center on Artificial Intelligence, was founded under the auspices of UNESCO by the government of the Republic of Slovenia. Its headquarters are at the Jozef Stefan Institute in Ljubljana, Slovenia.
UNESCO has more than 100 such centers where knowledge is produced and shared with the rest of the world. However, to date, none of them have dealt specifically with the issue of artificial intelligence. Thanks to IRCAI, we now have the support of an entire team that I'd like to thank, and who are mobilizing their diverse skills to make the most of artificial intelligence by ensuring it serves the common good.
How can an initiative such as IRCAI achieve maximum impact? We believe that this will be through developing a collaborating partnership with researchers and practitioners excited and committed to creating effective solutions for the key challenges of our age, as captured in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. It is a huge honor to tackle some of the thorniest challenges of our age, be they in global health, climate change, or the influence of fake news. The stakes could not be higher, and the perfect storm of challenges more pressing. Slovenia has made many important contributions in the development of artificial intelligence, from early pioneers of the field to the implementation of large-scale AI systems.
IRCAI operates within an ecosystem of AI players across different research departments at the Josef Stefan Institute, non-profits such as the Knowledge for All Foundation, and a number of startups between London and Ljubljana. The IRCAI mission covers education, research to implementation, and policy input, showcasing unbiased, rigorous, and comprehensive dialogue for policymakers, researchers, journalists, executives, and the general public to develop a deeper understanding of the complex field of artificial intelligence.
The Center has made decisive contributions to a new standard-setting instrument being prepared by UNESCO on the ethics of artificial intelligence. We have drafted a text underlining the need to develop AI in a way that respects our values and our rights. A text that addresses the social and gender biases sometimes embedded in algorithms.
IRCAI has started a top 100 study to unearth the amazing work being done by AI colleagues everywhere. It has also built mechanisms for researchers, policymakers, industry, and venture capital to join our global network of AI Excellence Center, addressing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. IRCAI is also seeking partnerships with international organizations, governments, companies, NGOs, universities, research institutes, AI consortiums, and government agencies around the world to become a coordination point, funding route, and exploitation accelerator to ensure that artificial intelligence is used for the common good. Join our exciting journey to the future.